And we're live. All right. Welcome, everyone, along to episode 5 of the Lifting in Life podcast. Thanks heaps for joining in. Hold on, my sister's just calling me.
Good intro.
Let's try that again.
I think that's your first intro as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Strong start. All right. What's up, everyone? Welcome along to episode 5 of the Lifting in Life podcast with me and Josh today. It's a pretty exciting episode today because Josh only a few weeks ago moved over to Melbourne. So not that we've really discussed it too heavily, but at least in my mind, the plan for today is to sort of go over some key learnings that Josh has gained throughout his few weeks in Melbourne and just really delve into that, hopefully share a few lessons that could easily be applicable to you as well if you're ever thinking about moving. So, over to you, Josh.
Shit, I thought I had you on mute. I was taking you off. Good start for both of us.
Yeah.
No, it's been great. It's been challenging for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you've got to sort of appreciate the landscape. It's just so different from normal circumstances. But also the thing that's been coming to mind for me a lot during this transition is, I was in Wellington for 16 years and 14 of those 16 years was steeped in some varying degree of alcoholism. So, actually sort of moving away and then viewing my experience there from a satellite view has given me kind of a different appreciation for it as well as a different perception of it all. But also, it's also triggered a lot of emotion, how do I kind of feel about that wide-reaching experience that I had? Have I kind of worked through the different phases that I need to? But look, as far as the city itself goes, it's amazing. It's awesome. I've been here a couple of times before and loved it. But it's obviously a different mindset when you're actually shifting to that place to live. As I was saying to you before, I think I'm on kind of the final boss phase now. So I've got to get an apartment locked in, which I'm waiting to hear back from. But yeah, it's all trucking along quite smoothly.
That's good, man. It's real good to hear. I think just as a podcast quality side note, I reckon if we mute our mics while we're not talking, it might help. If you either mute in Google Meet or mute it on the mic.
Cool.
Anyway, before we started this podcast, I was thinking of some questions to ask you because I know what it's like when you say come away from a holiday and people are like, "How was your holiday?" And it doesn't really give you a talking point. You regurgitate the same 2 sentences of a compressed experience of your holiday. So one question I wanted to ask to get some more, I guess, specific info was how does your sort of preconceived ideas of Melbourne versus the reality of Melbourne and your experience match up or mismatch?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked because, the last 2 times I came here, which was once I think about 10 or 12 years ago, and then again about 8 years ago, I was still drinking at the time. So my preconceived idea of the city was based on a version of myself that is no longer applicable. And so, sort of cruising around on the trains and the trams and stuff and sort of seeing various sites that I've been to previously when I came here and then kind of aligning that memory of that experience with my experience now, I guess it just feels like an entirely. It may as well be that I'd never come here before. There is that mild preconception that bleeds in a little bit, but at the same time, it's such a different version of myself that's now experiencing the city anew. On top of that, you can't sort of appreciate enough how much the COVID landscape has just changed absolutely everything. And so when I came here last time, obviously that wasn't even a thing. Coming here now, you can see that it's really factoring into a lot of I guess coercion that's coming through in terms of I can see a lot of energy going into trying to get people back to the central city to boost that economy, or any kind of economy related activity. Also just the general attitudes of people, which is something I've noticed in comparison to where New Zealand was at versus where Melbourne's at once I got here. But in terms of the preconception, I think it just it feels like an entirely fresh experience. It did, now that I think about it, I guess it did feel comforting in a way, knowing that I did already have a sense of what to expect. It wasn't completely alien to me. I'd been trying to get to the UK back in 2020, and looking back on that experience now, I think that it would have sledgehammered me a lot more aggressively. simply because it's not as close to New Zealand. It's a completely different alien environment that I hadn't been in before, all those kind of things. But yeah, I feel like the transition's been going relatively smoothly. It's just about navigating around those discomforts that you're going to experience when you're in a completely new environment. But it's getting there, yeah.
That's good, man. From obviously we haven't talked a lot in the past few weeks, but from what I've heard from you, it sounds like it's mostly going positive. Obviously, there's like challenges and learnings along the way, but that's almost inevitable. You'd almost be silly not to think that that was going to happen, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, again, it comes back to the fact that I had that, I was in Wellington for 16 years, and such a large portion of them was, battling with an addiction on some level, and then pulling myself away from that and going into a completely new environment, which, the positives of that are the people that I'm meeting and engaging with now only know this version of myself. They don't understand who I am prior to quitting drinking. But at the same time, there's that sort of, I don't quite know how to describe it. I guess it's like, when you become so comfortable with something, when it becomes such a quintessential part of your day to day life. And the environment of Wellington was, I knew it inside out, and I'd had these preconceptions tied to it. I'd had these previous relationships tied to it, but also different versions of myself. The DJing persona before I stepped away from that. All those kind of micro relationships that you have and you develop over time. One thing I'm starting to kind of align myself with now is, the people that I did have those relationships with then, do I still have capacity to have relationships with them now, depending on, whether or not there is actually an organic kind of glue holding that relationship together outside of just the sentimentality of knowing each other for 10 or 15 or 20 years or whatever. So there's a lot of reevaluation. But yeah, the experience is definitely, even the negative aspects of it, finding a way to navigate around that discomfort of a completely new environment and letting go of those previous versions of yourself, I guess. That's still a positive, even though it can feel a little bit challenging. It's in my mind, I know I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And instinctively, I know I'm moving in the right direction, even if there are still a few things along the way that I need to work around.
Speaking of your environment and social circles and your sort of day-to-day life, because you're obviously a, literally a different person now, especially now you're heading over there, how is that in crafting your environment and your day-to-day life, your social circles? How is that playing a role in your actions now? Is it something that's sort of at the forefront of your mind and you're consciously trying to craft your environment to be more positive, away from alcohol, more into sort of, healthy habits, the gym, fitness, like living a healthy lifestyle? Would you say it's a conscious thing that you're trying to put effort into crafting your environment, or is it something that you kind of think that it's more organically gonna come along?
I think it's reached a point now where it's relatively organic. I think to start with, it was definitely conscious, but like, I suppose an example I'll use would be a couple of days ago, I was evaluating the way I engaged with someone when I needed their referral for an apartment that I'd applied for. And, the style of communication that I engaged with them, and I guess the fluency of it and the smoothness of it and the way that I was kind of directing the situation, taking ownership of it and pushing it to where it needed to be. I remember thinking that the old version of me um, would never be that quite hands on and governing of the situation. I'd be, well, considerably sloppy and quite kind of like, oh, is this okay if not sort of governing it in a more assertive kind of way. So it does, to answer your question, it is very organic, but you do have these moments where you kind of go, that's like not the behavior that I know looking back I used to engage in. And that's when you really see the growth in yourself that's been established. When you take those moments, and those moments are quite critical. That's one thing I've learned from this experience as well, is, leading up to the transition, there was a lot of clout. I had to avoid getting COVID, which was at that time starting to break loose in New Zealand, or I wouldn't have been let on the flight. So I had to enter this kind of exodus from socializing 3 or 4 weeks before the flight. But then you're also on edge the whole time. You're just really, really concerned, like, "Oh, is this going to come together the way that I need it to?" Um, and so, one of the ways I've referred to drinking would be that it's like a form of distraction. I think I've mentioned this on the podcast, on one of our episodes before. It ends up becoming kind of a relationship, but also a full time hobby, and it really takes up a large portion of your thinking, of the thinking part of your brain, and or rather, the data where your day to day thoughts go. I mean, every part of your brain's a thinking part, really, isn't it? But
That's a good point. Good point.
hey, we got there. But it occupies that part of your brain that would sort of spend the day sort of considering certain decisions you're going to make, certain relationships you're engaging in, stuff like that. And once you stop drinking, like I did, suddenly you've got all this kind of, you know, free free available capacity to start tugging at threads that you haven't for years, even decades. I know that I certainly engaged in that. And when I was leading up to the transition, I kind of felt like it felt like a similar kind of distraction. I was busy with my mind was so occupied with getting things sorted for the transition, but also that constant thought process of, oh, I've got to avoid getting COVID, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to get this reference sorted, I've got to get that sorted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then when I got here, there was this kind of like, you know, the eye of the storm sort of thing. Like I no longer had to think with that level of aggression concerning all the bits and bobs. Like I could just kind of take a breath for a moment. And that's when the consideration started sort of piling in, when I started thinking through, um, you know, comparisons to who I am now with who I was back then. I'm now in this different, you know, far away environment from the environment where all those things took place. So I'm looking at the whole experience from a satellite view, um, and having that kind of time and that space and that, freeing my mind up the way that it was when I entered the eye of that storm, that calm sort of center phase, that was critical to then start making those comparisons, to actually go through that thought process, and allowing yourself time to reflect in that way also allows you the capacity to see how much you have actually developed, how much you have actually grown, how much you've changed, how much you've transitioned. And that to me is critical to also feel a sense of, positivity towards your experience.
Yeah, I remember those weeks leading up to you flying out when we were organizing our coffee catch up, and we had to make sure that it had to be, at least 2 or 3 weeks prior to your flying date, because we didn't, want you out and about and like risking getting COVID just from having a coffee. So
It
it was
was, I
interesting.
wasn't present. I remember I wasn't present at all. And it wasn't just yourself, it was everyone that I caught up with. Like I just wasn't there. And there was a number of people who ended up messaging afterwards, being like, look, I'm sorry. I couldn't really do much about this. It just, the landscape being what it is, I have to do this. But, everyone's understanding. I think everyone on some level, and, obviously I'm speaking exclusively about where New Zealand was in the COVID landscape. Each country is kind of in its own unique position now, some further than others. But where New Zealand was at that time, I think I got the impression from everyone I get engaged with that they were very much in this mindset of, in this landscape, you've kind of just got to do what you got to do. You can't take things too personally if you can't catch up with this person or the other. You've got to really just kind of crack on with what's my path that I'm on and what do I need to do to materialize the things that I'm working towards. And if that means not seeing anyone for a period of time, even months in some cases, then it is what it is. That's
Yeah,
just
and I feel like we've gotten really used to plans being cancelled and dropped and stopped at the last second. Like you might be able to like just about to do this thing and it gets stopped because of COVID, and it's not unexpected anymore. But I kind of want to go back to the environment and crafting your environment, because you mentioned a couple of interesting points. You mentioned how you had that conversation with that person to get a referral for the apartment and stuff, which was quite a conscious decision. But then you mentioned how you're also think it'll happen organically. I still feel like there's got to be some really conscious steps that you are putting in place to help craft your environment. So, what would you say are a few steps that you would consciously put in place? So, if you were to give advice to another person who's moving overseas and they also kind of want a bit of a fresh start and having a more positive, I suppose, motivating environment, what are some things you could put in place in order to at least facilitate that happening?
well, I mean, for my background, with the alcoholism and stuff, transparency would be a major key call out for me. So if you're trying to craft an environment that is, um, you know, a positive, uh, a nourishing environment for who you are and what your goals are, being transparent about not only what your goals are, but who you are as a person is going to result in, attracting the right kind of people. I've already met a few people since I've been here, and, I don't just spit at them the fact that, I had a drinking problem for as long as I did. But it does find a way to come up quite organically at the right moment. And then they know that's a major part of who I am. And then that comes into their decisions around what they'll include me in versus what they won't. But also it opens a discussion surrounding anything really that can kind of lead on from that, because you always get a response of curiosity. um, and I think that will attract the right kind of people as well. So your people are your environment in many ways. You might have a bit of solitude or a bit of independence or whatever, but these are the people that are going to be nourishing of who you are as well. And so if you are maintaining that value of transparency and communication with people, honesty about who you are, what your goals are, where it is that you're trying to go, then you are going to, not through your own coercive design, but rather just through the laws of attraction, attract the right people. Um, as far as the more sort of physical environment goes, like actually getting set up, getting your own apartment, getting your own place or whatever, I think, so I looked at this apartment a few days ago, and, you, you've got to pay attention to your instincts. So it's amazing for me as well. I mean, that's another call out in terms of the comparison to, the older version of myself versus who I am now. My instincts were nowhere near as refined as what they are now. They were very uh, held under a veil of murkiness via the alcoholism, and so they're very off key. I made some really bad decisions surrounding relationships. My engagements with other people and things like that. But once you kind of lift that clout, you're at the starting point where the instincts start to refine themselves and build to a far stronger place. And when I looked at this first apartment, I knew straight away that it was one that I definitely wanted, and so I went through the application process. But you almost don't need to one thing I've come to appreciate about instincts is, like, they'll identify a pattern before you consciously do. um, so there'll be this gravity that you feel, this kind of magnetism, or the opposite, and that's your instincts kind of pushing or pulling one way or the other. And so with the first apartment, um, looking back now, I can peel back the layers and sort of see why I was attracted to it. But I had a really good engagement with the woman that was showing me the apartment place. There was a really good vibe that came from the actual apartment itself. All these kind of things that lace together and create this strong kind of rope that then helps you pull at the decision that you need to make. Um, and it just kind of, it comes back to listening to that voice. And then, a few days later, I looked at another apartment that I was saying to a friend of mine, everything about it was great, but my instincts were kind of like, that's not, it's off key. And even now, I can't say why, but what I do know is that when you feel that, you need to listen to it. So coming back
And
to you,
the most interesting thing about instincts too is that they're built on our human evolution. Like thousands and tens of thousands of years of evolution has somehow crafted our instincts. And like you say, you don't know why, but there must be something about it. And it's definitely worthy of listening to, even if you think it's just a gut feeling. It's got to be there for some sort of purpose.
100%. I think it comes back to what I was saying before, with instincts identifying patterns before you consciously can. So when I know that some people interpret the voice, their instinctive voice, as being more of a metaphysical thing, like a third party external kind of energy that's guiding them. I don't go that far myself. What I think it is this place within our minds that identifies patterns, identifies flags, whether they be a green flag or a red flag, and kind of mulches them together. It's this kind of mulching sort of process, this composting kind of process, where what comes out at the other side is a decision making framework. And when you get that sharp kind of sting of no, 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 this isn't, or the positive flip of that, oh yeah, absolutely, this is what I want to do. you've got to really hone in on that. So everyone's experience is going to be different with what they're looking for. But I think that the key, uh, I guess, path I would follow in response to your question is hone in on your instinct and don't ignore it. Pay attention to it 100% and just let it kind of lead you, while at the same time taking accountability, taking ownership, and going after what you want.
Yeah, man, that's a really good point. I also like how you talked about coming into it with clear goals or a clear vision, but it's not like you're moving over there all murky and not really sure what you're wanting to get out of it. You at least have somewhat of a clear idea of what you do and especially what you don't want. Say, if we were to use alcoholism as an example, if you weren't to go over there with a clear purpose of, I want a house that looks like this, or I want a job that looks like this, or I want friends that look like this, or I want to go to a gym like this, then it's so easy just to end up where you were before by naturally sort of being attracted to, drinking in the bars because that's where you feel so comfortable and sociable. And that's like the friend group that you would eventually also attract from work and stuff like that too. So going into it with a clear vision of what you want to do over there, it sounds like it's a really important thing to do as well.
Yeah, and sometimes that vision can be like it's certainly clear, but it can operate at different levels. So what I mean by that is it could operate at a tangible material level where your clear goal is, you know, I want to get, a nice apartment that's got a nice balcony. I'm thinking about getting a cat. Um, I want to join this particular gym. I want to actually join a pottery class as well. These kind of clear, tangible things that are a quintessential part of your own identity. But then it could be at a higher level than that, where you don't necessarily know what the tangible goal to uh, materialize is, but you know that what you do want are, healthy relationships, a comfortable home that's easy to be kept warm. So it's a sort of higher level that you know has a number of different options underneath that umbrella.
And
But
it gives you the ability to reverse engineer those too. It's like, I want friends who also like going to the gym, or it's more bigger than that. I just want to have a healthy lifestyle and also be around some people who also like to live a healthy lifestyle. And
yeah,
then it eventually funnels into what gym should I go to? What hobbies should I get into? Who would be good for me to hang out with and who wouldn't?
yeah, totally. When I was first started looking for an apartment, I kind of had a loose idea of what I was looking for. It was definitely that kind of higher level goal that I was describing before, but it became refined once I went through the process, which I think is another key call out. Is you might have a very very clear vision of what you're looking for, and if you do, that's great. I think that's awesome. I think it's really awesome because you're going to end up saving yourself a lot of time. You're going to be able to just join the dots together in a really quick manner. If you aren't quite at that level of clarity, that's okay. But as long as you've got that kind of higher level idea, i.e., your positive relationships, all that kind of thing, what you then need to do is kind of just engage and then listen to your instincts as you're engaging. So when I first started looking for the apartment, um, I wasn't sure whether I wanted a one bedroom or a two bedroom, all those kind of things. And then once I actually physically started looking and actually got an idea of what is a potential option for me, that's when I got the clearer goal level established in my mind. Like, okay, I actually know what I'm looking for now.
It's like the theory versus the practical too, right? And that's
100%.
what that made me think of. Is it's real important to obviously have an idea and somewhat of a sense of clarity of what you want, but also be adaptable to the situation. If you're like, I want to go to Melbourne and have a penthouse apartment and overlook the river, but then you go there and a penthouse apartment is 10 grand a week and you can only afford $500 a week or something. You can't be upset when you can't do that thing. So it's about having that theory there, but if it doesn't match the practical, just be adaptable to that.
Totally.
Don't get hung
And
up on it.
100%. And, that's something that is talked about in the writing realm all the time. And I remember when I wrote my first, it was an essay that I wrote first in terms of putting it out into the public forum. And it was kind of just about some personal experiences I went through and stuff like that. Um, I had this experience both with that piece and then with the first short story I did, where I had an idea on where I wanted the story and the essay to go. So I pushed it to go that direction. It wasn't until I did my creative writing class at Vic Uni that I then got taught that, you will start somewhere that might just be, it might not even be an idea. It might just be a vibe that you've got about something, two people talking to each other, a particular scene, whatever. But then what you get taught through that process is once you start writing, it's the first draft's all feeling. Do you know what I mean? Like you kind of just throw up your idea on the blank page, like just type or just write whatever your preferred methodology is. Just throw the idea out there, and then where the talent for writing starts to come through is in the editing phase. When you actually go through and you change things around, change the order of things, change you know whatever, and the level of drafts that you go through, it could be anywhere from 2 to 200. It's endless because you could keep wanting to go back and change things. But essentially, that first point where it first starts sprouting out is all about feeling and just kind of going with the flow. And then once you go back and sort of refine, that's when you start picking up the different things that you know resonate that you want to then sort of sharpen and go from there.
Yeah, and something that's quite specific to writing is that those are almost like two different cognitive processes, though, right? They create versus the edit brain. They're so different too. So if you're trying to do both of them at the same time, it's not a really good match.
It's interesting you say that because that was essentially one of the first call outs I got in my writing process when I started that class was they call it wearing two hats at the same time, whether both the creative and the as you say the analytical hat, which is the editing hat. And I didn't kind of realize how much I was stifling my own process, um, because one of the things when you're typing, I can be quite a shocking speller. Um, Grammar, stuff like that. And when you're first throwing your draft on a blank page and you're just kind of like extracting it out of yourself, through what even means, you there's this tendency to go back and repair the spelling, the grammar, the whatever, straight away. And you kind of want to avoid that. Like there's always room to do that later. So just keep pushing through with your idea and then go through and refine it once you've kind of gestated that emotive feeling part of the process. And that's when you stop, put your analytical hat on, and as you say, go back and do the editing phase.
Yeah, I was as you're talking, I was trying to think about a way that sort of can be used as an analogy for what you're going through now. It's almost like if you're too conscious about crafting the perfect environment, yeah, it's almost like you're bringing a sense of confirmation bias into it. Like
100%. Yeah.
you're trying to get the thing that you're looking for versus like how will this thing go if I employ these simple actions, like those macro level things we talked about. I want to have a healthy lifestyle. I want to have a nice, clean apartment or whatever. And then you have those as your guiding pillars, but then you're not too conscious or too analytical about the micro actions because then it might not actually come out as good as what it could have.
Well, I think you just kind of nailed it when you described it as your guiding pillars. It's a guide. It's not a be all end all. The biggest mistake that gets made in writing, which goes far beyond writing and into every person on the planet, I believe, is that if you glue yourself to an idea, you're going to betray where it should organically go, and that's when your instincts sort of kick in and start firing through a more kind of organic process or whatever. And I see it in so when I say I see it operating outside of writing for you know every person on the planet is people. We have this sort of we have this tendency to have an idea about something, and then we tether ourselves to that idea, and it then becomes quite personal. Which this is where it gets really tricky. It's like so coming back to the writing example, you might have an idea for a character or a particular scene or whatever. And then once you've finished the piece, the scene doesn't make sense, or the character being there doesn't make sense, or the character making a certain decision doesn't make sense. And you decide to leave it in because you're tethered to it. You're really married to the idea, and it becomes personal in the same way a relationship with someone does. You don't want to sever that relationship. You're like, this is a brilliant moment, but it doesn't sort of make sense with the overall piece. But so I really want to keep it in there. And you've got to avoid that. And again, it comes back to that broader decision making where if you've got an idea of something, let it be your guide, and don't don't ever stop uh, knowing that that idea is just as critical as getting you to the outcome as the outcome itself, you know. So
Mhm.
it's your stepping stone, it's your guide. And then once you get to where it's more organically supposed to go, you haven't betrayed that idea, you haven't severed yourself from it. You've got to just essentially view it as a critical, absolutely needed part of the overall body of movements.
Yeah. I don't want to continue our tumble down the rabbit hole, but it just makes me think of when people get real tied to certain ideologies or even dogma that's thrown around. It can be quite destructive, and that's in heaps of different spheres. Both the gym space, you can keep it as superficial as that, or even like the political religion kind of realm. You can get super deep with that. So it's quite a interesting points that you're raising there, and the confirmation bias too. That made me think of my time doing my psychology degree. I first learnt about that when you're trying to conduct a study. If you're conducting a study, but you already in your hypothesis know what you want the result to be, then you're almost searching for the thing that you want the result to
Yeah,
be.
you'll bend the
Yeah,
narrative to get you
yeah,
to where you believe it was going to end, rather than letting it get driven by something more instinctive, something more
mhm,
organic. And people feel that, they do. To when it comes to, again, the writing realm, you know whether it be fictional stories or the broader example that we've spoken about, when it's decision making in general, people can feel when something's coming from an inauthentic place, a dishonest place, or a stubborn place, because they've tethered themselves to this idea. And I would call it a type of bureaucracy. It's it sort of goes outside the realm of common sense, and hitches itself to something that's more process
it's
driven.
egotistical as opposed to logical analytic, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I might just pull us back to the more of a reality, superficial. What's your experience been like with gyms over there? I know you're at Doherty's gym. That's sick. I've seen that on social media. Never been myself, but in my opinion, it's kind of the mecca of Australia. So as soon as you sent me a couple videos, I felt like I recognised it straight away, even though I hadn't been there. So keen
I
to
think I,
hear
I
more
think we
about
need
your
to.
experience there.
I think we should be more detailed about that story, Cam. I didn't even realize that I was at such a gym. I basically
Yeah,
sent you, I sent you a picture. Oh, this looks all right, and you're like,
yeah.
bro, you're at like one of the best gyms.
It's like being at like Venice gym in like America and being like, oh, whoa, I saw this cool gym down at Venice.
Yeah,
Yeah, I did think that was quite funny. And yeah, when you're like, oh, you know this one? I'm like, yep, I definitely know that one.
yeah. No, it was pretty sweet. So when I first got here, I was staying in Brunswick East, which is North Melbourne. It's for those that haven't been to Melbourne, it's kind of, yeah, quite alternative. Lots of cafes, lots of restaurants, but lots of vibe. There's heaps going on. I've walked around there a few times now, and just, yeah, the vibe there is awesome. So yeah, that was the first gym that I joined there, and I just paid for like a month straight up because I wasn't really sure where I was going to be, and then I ended up. I'm now, and the experience was awesome. Like, everyone there was obviously a sort of a passionate gym goer. It wasn't kind of, yeah, I guess, more um, vapid, more shallow kind of branding.
Chain gym
Yeah,
where people just kind of mostly donate to the gym or go to jump on the treadmill or something like that. There's
yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah.
passion in it.
Gyms for influencers, I guess we could call it. But it was definitely a lot more sort of like a passionate gym battleground, which was great. And everyone there I engaged with was real friendly and stuff. And then I ended up, so I was in Brunswick East for I think 2 or 3 weeks, and now I've come to a suburb called Footscray, which is more sort of like it's really diverse. There's a lot of sort of family groups that kind of operate in this sort of, in insular family kind of dynamics. It's not the same vibe as somewhere like North Melbourne, which is where I'm aiming to get back to when I get my own permanent apartment. So I ended up joining. It was Snap Fitness, wasn't it? I
Snap,
think.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, this is
yeah.
Snap, yeah.
And it was yeah, it was quite funny, sort of jumping from Doherty's, which was obviously a particular type of, these are your actual, passionate about working out, to more of kind of like your Starbucks
Yeah.
of the gymming realm.
Quite
But
vanilla.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's it'll tick a box for a short period of time. I'm only going to be here for, in total, I think it's a month and a half. But it was quite funny. And to be fair, the person I engaged with was great, but like, it was a bit cheeky. So I basically just wanted to pay for a month up front, which is always a nightmare with gyms. Like they always charge you through the teeth if you're not signing some ridiculously
Yeah,
hard to get out of contract.
they want to lock you in, bro. Minimum 12 months. They want to lock you in.
Yeah, and like I kind of get it in a way, but there seems to be there's a large market of people that are in transition who still want a gym, and it needs to be easier. And that's where Doherty's was really great. They just let me pay $75 for the month.
Yeah, when you
It was
said that, man, that's crazy. That's cheaper than my membership in Wellington.
yeah,
For
yeah,
4 weeks, I would pay $100.
yeah. It's quite. There's been quite a number of uh, aggressive differences I've noticed. So I think I sent you screenshots tonight of like payment plans for cell phones.
Bro,
So it
that
was
is
like
unreal.
so it was like $55, I think, for 40 gigs a month. And I think in New Zealand you pay
I don't
uh,
even know if we have those kind of plans.
no, you don't have that. So I think it was like $10, so $60 for 8 gigs or something like that. I remember
Yeah,
was looking at them side by side, and I'm like, I can't quite get my head around like the sort of. But then I sort of thought about that, and I guess New Zealand being as kind of tucked away as it is, I can't imagine there'd be as much market competition. And market
no,
competition is obviously
not
good
at
for
all.
driving down prices. You know, the economy here is definitely a lot more booming. Even prior to COVID, with COVID, I mean, yeah, I don't really. I feel like there's kind of a bit of a grim chapter for New Zealand to get through over the next few months until what I anticipate is that when Europe goes back into winter and New Zealand comes or Australasia comes back into summer, so around like November, I reckon that's when a surge of holiday visa peeps will start migrating
Yeah,
back to New
definitely.
Zealand, get that talent pool back. But anyway, it was at Snap Fitness, and she was like, "Oh, so you can pay upfront for the month. So just prepay for the lot of it. I think it was $100 for the month, $50 deposit for like the pass tag thing, or you can sign up for a month and it's just a little bit cheaper." And I'm like, okay, this doesn't quite really make sense to me. So why would you need me to sign up for a month? I mean, it's a month. You know what I mean? Like, and then I was like, well, it kind of makes sense to go with the cheaper option. And then she goes, so you have to give 30 days notice to cancel the sign up. So, so I'm like, oh, hang on a minute.
So I
So
gotta give you the notice now?
now
Or-
that was basically my thinking process. And like, when obviously when you're transitioning even from city to city, let alone from country to country, there's that kind of all those different little things you've got to
Mm.
kind of learn that are sort of plastering away at your energy. And so you start sort of life hacking wherever you can to save that energy. And as soon as she said that, I just sort of cut her off and I was like, I'll just pay straight up for the month. Like, I could have dug around a little bit and tried to find holes in her logic, which
Save
was,
$5 or $10.
yeah, but the cheekiness of it, I like when I walked away, I was like, I don't understand what just happened there, but like I feel like I don't want to let myself think about this for too long.
What if it was
Um,
February and
what's
there
that?
wasn't? What if it was February
If it was February?
and there wasn't 30 days?
Oh yeah.
Right, she got him.
Yeah, absolutely. We've snuck him in.
Yeah.
I couldn't quite get my head around that, and it made me go, because again, my experience at Doherty's was so smooth and cheap and easy, versus that kind of again that sort of Starbucks style approach to gymming. But it's been quite similar to New Zealand in terms of like um, the hey bros you get at the gym, the people who kind of just catch and, oh hey bro, give a nod to. You start to see your regulars after even just a couple of days. You start to see your regulars, your people that are in there as often as you are. But where it got prickly for me was I got COVID. I got COVID on week 3, I think, of being here, and it was the fucking pits. Like it was. So I got a really aggressive fever for the first, I reckon, 24, 36 hours. Once that broke, I kind of got into like a tolerable groove, but it just took me down major. Like I was 2 weeks into a new job as well. So already I'm kind of, yeah,
That
already,
sucks. So when you first start, you do not want to have any time off because I don't know. At least when I start a job, I'm so conscious of the fact that I'm crafting my work identity right now. And if I'm taking all this time off in my first month or first few weeks, I'm going to be that dude who takes lots of time off. Then you feel like then you feel like you have to sort of work it back and sort of gain your identity again.
totally. And, I think the most positive way to view it is it's an opportunity. Okay. So you've got to kind of communicate with these people now that you're unwell 2 weeks in, and you're obviously concerned with the optics. So what you're thinking is, how do I craft my communication here so that they clearly see that I'm authentic and someone that can actually still be absolutely relied on, and that this is just, also it's quite a good opportunity to see what the values of the business are,
Yeah.
because you know we've still very much, I know that a lot of us want to tuck it away into the back of our mind, but we are still very much in a pandemic landscape. And so for a business to kind of expect you to just work through something like that would be quite it would be a very quick identifier that this is a business that has a value that maybe doesn't resonate with your own. And I'm contracted as well, so it was quite an interesting experience with identifying those, but it went really positively. They were great about it. Um, Again, I think in this landscape as a business, you've got to be open minded. You've got to be. I mean, this was no mild cold. I know that a lot of people's experience have been on par with a mild cold, but like I was shocked at how aggressively it took me down. Um, at the same time, I think I'd just gone through 2 months of kind of stringing together my transition. I was kind of at a bit of peak exhaustion. Um, I think my resilience was really low. My diet wasn't as good as it normally is because you're sort of eating on the go quite a lot. All
Feels
those.
like it would have been more surprising if you didn't catch it at that time when your sort of energy stores and your immunity was at its lowest, especially moving to a new city with like obviously a much bigger population.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think I was basically ripe for the plucking, and you're transitioning around a lot. Um, so yeah, I would have been surprised if I didn't. Well, how long have I been here now? Like 5 weeks. I would have been surprised if I hadn't have caught it by now. But it was still quite a bit faster than I expected. But yeah, so I didn't actually end up gymming for a while because it just took me down so aggressively, which is probably a good thing in a way, because obviously my body was saying, you really need to kind of just chill out just for a little bit so that we can regather our forces, um which is fine. But yeah, I was genuinely shocked at how much it really just depleted my energy, and took me down obviously I don't know what particular strain I've got. I know that when I took the test, it was an aggressively positive result. How like you can see the line that's sort of
It
like, this
come up
was like
straight away as well.
straight away,
Yeah.
like this like really thick blot.
Damn.
So I was like, yeah, that's I suppose to be expected, right? But yeah, everyone I've engaged with was like, yeah, that was quick. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, I'm lucky I didn't get it, shortly before I came over or whatever. Um, but yeah, it was, again, I saw a lot of people talk about how it was a mild cold for them, and for me, it just wasn't at all. I do suspect it was, again, all those sort of things that were just climbing together. But I feel like I'm relatively on the other side of it now. The exhaustion's still kind of there a little bit, but coming back to the original questions around the gym, I'm sort of starting to get back into a routine now, but I'm still transitioning. So, but yeah, the experiences have been positive. It's just a whole new environment and a whole new kind of etiquette and a new style to kind of learn. But it's very eclectic. You in New Zealand, or at least in Wellington, you'd sort of have your kind of your gym archetypes, you know, your kind of stereotypes, I guess. And here it's like it's far more of an eclectic mixed bag. There's just so much more diversity here. So
I feel like that would be quite a fresh new experience as well, as opposed to what you've grown so accustomed to over the past sort of 4 or 5 years that you've been going to the gym.
yeah, no, absolutely. I think because you're very cognizant of the fact that you kind of just want to observe for a little bit. Make sure that you're operating within whatever the kind of particular etiquette to this particular location, rather than just going and sort of arrogantly with what you've been predisposed to or whatever. But no, it's been really good. I think I'm looking forward to getting back to North Melbourne, back to Brunswick East, and then firing back to Dalwardies. It's definitely yeah, it's definitely a cool place.
And outside of the gym and work, have you thought much about what other hobbies you'd potentially like to explore?
Yeah, so
Obviously, you got your writing too on top of that, but
yeah, that'll be a major driver. One of the things with looking for this apartment is so coming back to what I was saying earlier about not sort of knowing exactly what I wanted until I started looking. I knew once I started looking that I definitely did want 2 bedrooms. So my second bedroom's going to be set up for like get really, really set up for writing, but also working from home quite a bit. And while I'm working from, I'm going to kind of have like a double used office, like for working from home, but also my writing. And the idea is that even while I'm doing my 9 to 5, I've got these kind of ideas pinned to the wall behind me that I can sort of allow to gestate even while I'm doing my kind of box ticking 9 to 5 sort of stuff. Um, when you take your micro kind of pauses and things like that. But once I've got my own apartment, I'm very much looking forward to engaging with kind of some writing groups here. There's Meetup, I think on Bumble. I think there's like it's like a non-dating option, so I'm going to start cracking into those. The issue is you always kind of like run into there's always kind of a weirdo factor. You've got to get-
Yeah. It's like you gotta put it through a filter first.
yeah, the literary world is also very it can be really pretentious. So on Twitter, I try and use my social media as like a tool, so being really particular about what I follow. And like, so there's a lot of advice that comes through my feed from, really strongly established writers about how they, what is their process and things like that. And, you read each one as it comes through and you sort of, it goes into your composting, I might try that myself, all those kind of little things. But on Twitter, I ended up following the screenwriters hashtag, I think, and the communities. Yeah, I mean, it didn't. There's quite a lot of snide snarkiness in there. Not as much uplifting of each other as I would have hoped. Things like that. So coming back to those things that we were talking about earlier with building your environment and stuff, that's definitely going to be something I keep an eye out for when I am engaging with those groups. But also, um, someone who is very dear to me back in New Zealand once said to me that when you're in a situation that you don't necessarily want to be in, the thing that you should always ask yourself, and that could be, an engagement with someone or a particular environment or whatever, the thing you should always ask yourself is not what don't I like about this? Ask yourself strategically, what can I get from this? You know, not in a capitalist way, and kind of like in a
How can I
learning way.
make profit?
Yeah, how can I make
Yeah.
profit? Yeah,
Yeah.
question mark,
Yeah.
profit.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, how can I pull something from this situation that is going to be a learning moving forward?
Yeah.
Um,
It's like you're
partic-
trying to search for the positive or the silver lining in the situation as opposed to just being overcome by how negative.
yeah, yeah. And the tricky thing there is when you're in those situations that you don't want to be in, it doesn't feel positive. So your mind doesn't go to a positive place. But think about how often you're telling a story later that is to do with a bad experience you had, and the way you're telling the story is like, it's good banter. You get some back and forth going with your crew
Mm.
or whatever.
You learn
Uh,
that from going on holiday. The things that you talk about the most or that are most exciting to talk about is the things that didn't go right.
yeah,
If your holiday just goes seamlessly well, I mean, it's cool, but it doesn't make it interesting.
yeah. When we talking about when you're in the States and you got into a slight car collision, I think,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I
The first time
remember,
I went to the States, man, it was a nightmare. We got screwed over from the car rental company. We got into like that small car crash on our last day, and there was just so many things that didn't go right. Second time, it was absolutely seamless. Nothing went wrong, and it was good. We obviously learned, but
it was a
like,
boring story though, wasn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. How was your trip? Yeah, really good actually.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about something else. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember you guys talking, you and Chloe talking about that particular incident. And now that we're sort of analyzing it, the thing that jumped out at me was Chloe was sort of using all these sort of words to describe it, like, oh, anxious, this wasn't, oh, this was, oh, you could sort of see, but at the same time, she was like smiling as she was telling the story, like, oh,
yeah,
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 it
yeah.
was
In
this interesting
retrospect, it's
experience.
funny now, but at the
Yeah,
time,
absolutely.
she was crying and like we didn't know it was going to happen. And but yeah, it's funny
Yeah.
story to tell now.
So I'll probably, as I'm engaging that particular, I guess, sector, um, I am going to be wary of kind of, just being, just being really, obviously being open minded, but also just being cautious about who I sort of let into my hemisphere versus who I don't. Um, the big thing for me with people in your environment is, do we uplift each other? And a real quick identifier for that is, what was their response to some good news I shared? Do you know what I mean? Like, was there sort of a strong support, a strong kind of feeling of like happiness for me, that kind of thing? And I learned that from one of the people I just mentioned before, but two people that are very dear to me back in New Zealand. They really installed that in me. That identifying that this person is actually genuinely here, genuinely happy for me. I'd had some sort of prickly relationships in the past where there was maybe a bit of a competitive dynamic, and it was a little bit toxic or whatever. Which I don't say with any malice. I think it's just looking back. Sometimes it's just how things go. Sometimes a dynamic like that can develop. It's almost incidental in a way. But that'll definitely be something I'm looking out for as I sort of appeal to those groups and try and develop a sense of community for myself. And the other thing is I want to start looking at playing guitar out live. I've I went through recently and actually named, like, so if I've got an idea on guitar, I'll just kind of record it in like a recording app on my phone. And I went through one afternoon here and named everything. So I had a reference for myself when I was going through and picking it out. And I was like, shit, I've got like, 2 albums of material here. And, whether whether or not it's good doesn't really matter. It's more about like, this is something that I'm expressing that is very authentic to me. And, why not take that step? And, I DJ'd for um, traditionally in a club environment, but there were a few occasions where I DJ'd in front of thousands of people at a festival or at a particular event or whatever, and it always felt comfortable to a certain extent, based on the fact that you're a little bit hidden. You've got this kind of DJ booth in front of you and a guitar. It terrifies me because you're so much more exposed. But I want to push myself to engage that level of discomfort because it'll be such a motivating tool for further development.
I want to go back to what you were talking about, how you know, a red flag in people when, or potential friends, is when they're not supportive of, positive things you want to achieve. I saw a cool piece of advice the other day, which is also a red flag, but sort of the reverse in a way, where it's, if you mentioned something that was a negative experience for you, a good friend doesn't try and one up your negative experience. So, say an example, oh yeah, I've gone through this journey of alcoholism, and someone might be like, oh, me too, but man, I was also like, couldn't stop smoking weed or something too. And they're not asking about your experience or being supportive. They're straight away just trying to one up you with something more negative that they've been through.
Totally, yeah. I actually saw one of those recently. There's a name for it. I can't remember what it's called. Um, this is when we need like a Jamie, from
Yeah,
the Joe,
we should have missed one of those.
yeah, Joe Rogan Experience, a third party to do our Google searches.
Yeah.
It's like toxic, one up something or other. But the example I saw was in a employer employee dynamic, and the employee was like, "Oh, my grandmother's got cancer, and she might only have a week left to live." And then the employer responds with, "Oh, my dad died of cancer, and I worked through." And it's just like,
Whoa, that's a pretty heavy
oh,
example
this
too.
is LinkedIn, so you want to take it with a
Yeah,
grain of salt. The
yeah,
stories
yeah,
on
yeah,
LinkedIn I read sometimes, I'm like, that didn't fucking
yeah.
happen. Like,
But even as an example, it's clear to understand it. Like, that makes sense. It's like, here's something bad. Oh yeah, me too. I went through something bad, but it was even worse than what you went through.
yeah, totally.
Mm.
And I think that you're right. That is a real quick identifier. It's funny you say that actually because I was talking with a good friend about. I think she's a bit more open minded than I am, in that she'll sort of uh, when I put on the table what I did, she sort of responded by saying, she wouldn't kind of close off that quickly, and I kind of defended my position, and I was essentially talking about how to identify those really quick, non-negotiable red flags, and then I gave examples, and one of the examples was what you just pointed out, and also the positive responses when you're sharing good news. One of the um, primary ones that I think a lot of people concur with is how certain company you're keeping will treat a food server when you're in a restaurant.
Yeah, I
You know what I mean?
love it. Yep, yep, yep. Keep going.
And she was just basically saying that I think before I gave those examples, she was sort of like, I wouldn't sort of have that much of an aggressive red flag identifier. And then when I gave the example, wouldn't say she came around 100%, but she could definitely see it more strongly from my view. And I'm like, look, you need to, and once you hit a certain age or a certain phase in your life, which is quite often tied to age, you do need to develop those quick fire decision making frameworks. And sometimes you will see certain things in people and you'll just be like, no, that's it. Like, you're not getting past that point, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I love that discussion of the how someone treats someone who is perceivably lower than them. Like if you're at a nice restaurant and there's a waiter or waitress serving you, because the red flag that it shows me or makes me sort of think about is if they're treating that person like that, why are they not treating me like that? Like, what are they see this friendship being built upon? Is it because they perceive me to be on their level, so I'm worthy of being in their company? Or um, I don't know. I suppose you could take it pretty deep, but yeah, there's a lot of things that sort of come up when you see someone mistreat someone who they believe is below them.
Which is why it's become such a strong non-negotiable red flag indicator for me, is because I have spent time peeling back the layers on why I feel that strongly about it, and there's a lot going on there. I mean, obviously, you do always want to keep that kind of um, that I guess benefit of the doubt buffer. So asking yourself a simple question was of, is this who this person is, or are they just really, really off key today? Has something kind of happened, because there's always kind of something going on that you don't really know about. Um, but yeah, peeling back that particular example, there's a lot of things going on there in terms of like perceived social and class divide, arrogance, just general disrespect, a lack of courtesy, a lack of, I guess, awareness that, someone in that position works really hard but doesn't get paid very well. Having to put up with your bullshit on top of it is like, it's just not necessary. It's it's a result of the market. The market has dictated that this person within that particular sector should be paid X. That's something that just is the way it is. But certainly the way that we behave when we engage with people that have sequestered themselves into a particular sector that maybe doesn't reward them as well as others, I think that's something that we can all contribute to positively. And when someone doesn't, it's like, you dick.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, asshole. And I like what you talked about in terms of the guitar, and likening it or comparing it to DJing, and how much more of an exposed feeling that you get sitting behind a guitar in terms of instead of a DJ set. But what that made me think of is how it's clear that although you want to go there and find some sense of comfort, your main objective isn't to go there and just build another comfort zone. You're also wanting to pick things up and experiment with things that keep you outside of your comfort zone at the same time.
yeah, and actually, it's nice to hear you say that. I didn't sort of view it from that perspective, but yeah, I guess that would be certainly how I feel about the situation. I do want to um, not just get stuck in another routine, or rather, not just get lost in another routine. I want to feel like I'm forward progressing, and you you come to a realization that any kind of thing that got you to the next phase, or triggered the next level of growth, the next chapter or whatever, always, or almost always, I suppose, I can't say 100%, but close to it, almost always has a level of discomfort attached to it. If it's comfortable, I just don't know if you're going to be getting that growth or development out of it.
Mm,
Discomfort is growth and development.
absolutely.
And I know that it's hard. I know that it's tricky, and I know that it's uncomfortable. Um, but there are these ways of tempering that. Like, you don't want to be uncomfortable every day.
It's not realistic.
That's not realistic, and you'd be an anxious mess. But so you do want to kind of have like your self-soothing moments, your
Mm,
self-caring moments, your moments in between where you're just seeing someone that you're already friends with, that you are very comfortable with, and it's nourishing and it's
yeah.
enriching, and then that kind of rebuilds your resilience for the next level of discomfort that comes your way.
Absolutely. I love the analogy of having one foot in chaos and one foot in order. Your order is your living environment is not changing all the time. That's stable. Your working environment, that's pretty stable. But then you have the one foot in chaos, which is stepping out in front of a crowd with a guitar who you don't know at all. You're going to this person's social event like a dinner or something, and you don't really know people. Those are just obvious examples, but you got one foot in sort of comfort and stability, but one foot sort of always pushing you forward onto something else that's outside of your comfort zone at the same time.
I feel like that's writing as well, with what we were saying before, one foot in creative chaos and another in your analytical editing, and sort of using one to feed the other, and
Yeah,
it becomes like what's it called? The eternal loop. I can't
the
remember.
the
But
infinity sign thing.
infinity sign, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
which references a previous role, which is a bit embarrassing. But no, you're absolutely right though. Like, and I think that both sides sort of feed each other. Um, Again, it does scare me quite a lot. But I feel like I can't. I imagined in my head, if someone was to say to me, "Why would you do these things if they make you uncomfortable?" And you're sort of having that in your head. You have those imaginary conversations with people, which it might be someone it might be someone that you just imagined, whatever. And these internal conversations are kind of like a means of trying to challenge your own position without actually going through the action of engaging with someone third party.
Yep.
Um, how can I strengthen my position by having it challenged through a question that someone could potentially answer? And that could potentially ask me. And one of those questions was, why would you do this if it just makes you uncomfortable? And my immediate answer in that internal conversation was, I don't have a choice. Like, I have to. Like, I feel like it's such a quintessential part of me. It's something that's always happened, um, or something I've always done. Rather, there were certainly periods, um, and the alcoholism is very much tied to this, where I numbed myself and distracted myself from a lot of discomfort. But in terms of the kind of creative element and you know, with DJing first, actually stepping out there and performing for people and stuff like that, it felt, I was following the poetry. I felt like it felt true to me. It felt like it was something I was meant to do. And similar to when your instincts are kind of like coming at you with a sharp voice, you don't ever ignore that. You got to follow that poetry. You got to, that's what you tether yourself to, that poetry, and because that poetry it's a guide. It's not a firm idea that you then never divorce yourself from. It's something. It's a gravity. It's an energy. It's something that pulls you, and yeah, you've got to allow yourself to slide into that current.
Yeah, man, that's a really interesting point you bring up. I don't know if I'm unnecessarily like passionate or forward about it, but that idea of not doing things because they're hard, just like I don't know, that defeatist mindset frustrates me so much. It's like, why wouldn't you do something if it's uncomfortable? What are you getting out of your comfort zone right now, other than not having to do anything uncomfortable? If you're pushing yourself to do things that are uncomfortable, that's only inevitable that you're going to grow from it. And also, life isn't always going to be comfortable. If you did more things that pushed you out of your comfort zone, perhaps you would respond better when things push you out of your comfort zone, whether it be work stress or, there's so many things that are going to happen in your life that are inevitably going to take you out of your comfort zone. So why not put in a bit of effort and push yourself outside of your comfort zone?
I
And
think.
also,
Sorry, you go.
I was going to say, also in a comfort zone, to me, it feels like you're going to send yourself down this negative spiral of poor physical health, poor mental health, because you're not doing anything physically challenging. So you're probably not exercising at all. And you're reaching for foods that you always just feel like, which are probably pretty shitty foods, like high sugar, high fat. And then you're not going to pursue other hobbies or interests that could potentially be challenging. So you're just going to go to work and come home, watch TV on repeat. And to me, that's just like a cycle for really bad mental health, really bad physical health. I think that's where my passion around that topic really stems from, especially my experience personal training. It's like you got to almost force this person to go to the gym twice a week.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think you are kind of developed in such a way where you would never be able to empathize with that approach, because you're a personal trainer, and the whole ideology of personal training is, self-betterment and transitioning, engaging engaging discomfort to better yourself. So your kind of uh, ideological blueprint that then fuels your approach would be completely at odds with that.
Yeah, I just find it real hard to calmly have a conversation around that topic with someone who doesn't want to do things. I think it probably does stem from personal training because my preconceived ideas of personal training when I went in there is perhaps I maybe subconsciously thought that everyone I was going to train liked the gym, wanted to be there, and wanted to learn the most, that they could about going to the gym and training. But often it was the complete reverse. It was like they're only coming to the gym because they're coming to see you. They don't want to change their diet. They don't want to train more.
Yeah.
They don't want to do any more cardio. But on the other hand, they want to lose weight, get fitter, get healthier, but not change the comfort zone pattern. And it just like every time comes back to that comfort zone. Just do one thing that makes you a little bit uncomfortable. It's probably going to be much better for you than just spending another evening watching Netflix.
I think there's a couple of things that are sort of stewing in the melting pot on that one, and what sort of saddens me, one of the factors that saddens me is I think a lot of it comes from you know we're probably one of the first generations to experience this, and any generation that's coming in after us will certainly be steeped in it to a further extent. Um, there's so much uh, language and branding and information that comes through in social media that really uh, implements this ideology that there should be a shortcut to reach this, um, and that probably rewires people's understanding of the process. To quite a large extent. We're moving past this kind of. I mean, already it's going to be challenging in itself, because you've got habits to break and all that kind of thing, which is, anyone who manages to do that, I tip my hat. I've gone through that myself as well, and it's not easy. But you've got this further kind of constant noise of social media esque ideologies coming through that are really, you know, one thing I was thinking about recently was, which I'm embarrassed to admit, was Kim Kardashian, and
Oh, yeah.
well,
Interesting.
I mean, she got sort of torn down quite a bit for some comments she made at Met Gala, but I was actually thinking more about her comment in a interview with, I want to say, Vanity Fair, and she was talking about. I was thinking about this recently because of my own experience with transitioning, and she was talking about the comment she made was addressed to young women primarily, and she made some kind of comment about how people just don't seem to want to work enough, or get off your ass and work harder or something like that. And having someone make that comment that has such limitless, immeasurable resource at their disposal, and the reason why it came up for me recently was because I've been unable to write while I've been searching for an apartment, and I can feel this kind of critical mass of frustration because it's something that's really good for my mental health, that continuous flow. Um, but I just feel stretched too thin. And then on top of that, I've got the exhaustion of just recently having COVID and all that kind of thing. But while I was looking for an apartment, I remember thinking, like, how much easier would this process be if I had if I had resource available to me where someone else just sorted this out for me? You know what I mean? And so getting
Yeah.
that kind of messaging from someone that's in a position of immeasurable resource, telling people that they're not working hard enough, when in fact it's not just the hard work, it's also all the other things in between that you have to balance. You might be a young mother. You might be also trying to balance a 9 to 5 career while you engage your passion project where you've got kids to think about, things like that. You don't have resource available to you to have those things managed in the background by a third party while you're trying to do this.
Mm,
And yet when someone who is at that height of I guess, material success puts out this message that you're not working hard enough if you don't meet the level of success that I'm at. Although that wasn't said directly, but there is certainly that inadvertent implication there. I just think is fucking toxic beyond measure. Like
mm,
it's, um, and so coming back to the original point I was making there, I think that for a lot of these people that come through who have that always existing difficulty of having to break habits, coupled with a more recent element of the toxic social media ideologies that come through, or social media related ideologies. It's yeah, I do empathize. It's hard work. It's a lot to push through. And on top of all that, you've also got your self criticism, your self doubt, your imposter syndrome. All that kind of thing. Um, and so coming back to that sort of person you're describing who won't engage that discomfort, I see a lot of it in the kind of business corporate realm. I'm sure if you've seen it yourself in your role, but people that have been in those roles for like 20 or 30 years, and that they're just not going anywhere. They're comfortable as hell. Um, and a part of me sees why. Um, Having that cycle broken, yeah, I'm not really too. What do you think the first step would be?
Yeah, well, if we were to just use, say, the gym fitness wanting to lose weight as our example, I'd say the first step is to, oh man, there's so many ways you could take it, but I would first just focus on output, honestly. Like if losing weight is something that you want to do and you're currently not doing anything, which is often the case. So what I've learned from especially being in the office and my time as a PT and stuff is that people blame weight gain on the fact that they're getting older. And it's like, yep, you're getting older, but that's not the catalyst for you putting on weight. The catalyst for you putting on weight is that you're doing way less than what you used to. So I would honestly say first step, like not even sign up to a gym. Honestly, if you don't want to, I'd start off just by simply putting on some walking shoes and literally just
Yeah,
going for a walk. Go for one half an hour walk a week, minimum. That could, well, maximum. Sorry, that could just be it for your first month. That's already more than what you were doing before. I think, like you say, with social media, people who are in this negative space, but potentially want to change, they see people on social media. One of their first thoughts is like, oh man, that person's so lucky that they look like that. And then the second thing is this person might be pushing a program or a diet that they think they absolutely must follow in order to achieve the results that they want. But then obviously that feeds into like all the capitalism, blah 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 that we were talking about before, all these products and different diets and different fads. And but I would break it down, simplify it. It's literally for most people as simple as input output. And the first thing I would focus on for the majority of people is your output. Because a lot of people, especially if you're working in an office job, there's just no output there whatsoever. Like, man, especially with working from home now, if you think about you working from home, get up, have breakfast, have a coffee, whatever, sit down at your laptop, maybe watch something at lunchtime, sit down at your laptop, and then watch something in the evening. Like that's what I've learned from me working from home is that if it's a rest day, especially, and I'm working from home, I could literally do nothing all day. Takes a conscious effort to get out there and get some steps in if you're wanting to sort of get your output up. So the very first step I would say is don't even bother about gyms or even looking at your diet. It's just start incorporating some output. Get outside, go for a 30-minute walk once a week. Start off of that and see how it goes. You don't need to overcomplicate it. So often when people want to make a physical change to their bodies, they think they have to do everything at once. Like, I can only drink green tea and 3 hard-boiled eggs and 2 cashew nuts a day, and I need to do Pilates. And, they go into some random ass fad diet that isn't sustainable and also just isn't necessary.
I
Like,
see that
just
come through quite a lot in hustle culture. I don't know if that would be the correct way to term it, but
yeah,
I've, you know, there's a lot of quick get rich quick schemes that sort of surround this. But the kind of culture that seems to be very evident within the social media generations, where like you always need to be on the hustle, you always need to be, doing this and doing that, and like I have fallen into that trap myself a little bit. Like one thing I'm learning from writing is patience. Because you can't finish something straight away. It does have to sort of go through its gestation process, and that is implementing in me a strong value of, okay, well, sometimes things do need to happen in their own accord. You can't just continuously try and push something over the line, like one after the other, bang bang bang. There is a sense of patience involved, but also pulling your mindset back to a place of greater pace. I saw a tweet where some guy was saying, oh, if you're in your 30s, you should be surrounded by a bunch of other people in their 30s who are talking about what their next plan is, what their next goal is, what they're doing about it. You should be surrounding yourself with people that are always on the hustle, blah blah blah. And I just thought, "Fuck, it's just so, it's such a it's a style, it's a culture that I think really furthers what you were just describing there, where you feel like you have to be doing all the things on any given day at any given time. Like
Yeah.
I see it come through in work culture quite a lot. I
Mhm.
posted an article the other day where it was talking about how, like, we're more strongly, we've got a greater population of, in the corporate realm, we've got a particularly banking financial industry. We've got a greater population of people and talent to pull from than we have at any other time in history, and yet somehow we're busier than we've ever been at any other time in history. And I do wonder about it a lot. I'm not necessarily saying being busy is a bad thing, and I know a lot of people have a value of wanting to feel like energized, ready to work, and so, and that's great. I totally support that, but I do feel like there's this culture that comes through that impacts um, our personal lives, our uh, understanding and our needs surrounding getting fit, our working lives, that says we need to be busy all the fucking time, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't resonate.
I saw a real cool quote um, a few weeks ago that really ties into this, and it's people don't set their ceilings low enough. And it just really got me thinking because you always hear the hustle culture and stuff like that. And I'm all for it. Like, I think you should, be working towards something, and you get a lot of positive mental and physical benefits from working hard, pushing out of your comfort zone, like what we've been saying. But often, say if we were to use the fitness losing weight analogy again, if you set your ceiling too high, say, okay, I'm going to weight train 6 days a week. I'm going to do 5 1-hour cardio sessions a week, and I'm only eating 3 boiled eggs a day. And then that's your ceiling. You pitch it all the way up there.
Yeah,
It's, in my opinion, maybe some people could do it, but I would say it's almost inevitable that you're not going to be able to achieve that. And in turn, it's probably going to negatively spiral down where you just end up just stopping it completely. Whereas if you set your ceiling at, I'm going to do 2 30-minute walks a week just to get outside, 30 minutes, that's all I'm going to do. You've got so much room to grow, progress, see yourself progressing and working towards a goal incrementally rather than having this negative stigma attached to you working out. Because a lot of your happiness comes from you working towards goals and seeing yourself tick off incremental steps towards those goals. So, my
yeah.
goal, lose 30 kilos. Okay, I'm going to start off with 2 30-minute walks for 4 weeks. Cool. Oh, wow, I lost 4 kilos just from doing that. You might not lose 4 kilos. That's quite a lot. I lost 2 kilos from doing that, but at least it's something. So cool. I'm going to add it up, make it 3 walking sessions a week. And you know what? I'm now got the confidence to sign up to a gym, and I'm just going to see if I can go once a week, just do a walk on the treadmill, and then see how I feel about doing weights and see how I feel about doing a class. And what that also makes me think of is people, like you said earlier, wanting a quick fix to that weight loss. But my sort of counterpoint to that is, well, it's taken you 40 years to get as big as you are now throughout your life, putting on weight gradually, and you want to lose it in a month. It's not realistic, you know? Maybe you lose it in a year, 2 years, depending on what you do. But you got to be realistic and understand that it's taken you a long time to put on this weight. So it's not going to be a quick fix. You're not going to take a pill and it's all going to go. You're not going to start at the gym and start walking and then, well, all of a sudden I've lost 20 kilos. Like, it's going to take time, but you want to do it in a manner that's sustainable and one that you can continue doing because it's a lifestyle change. It's not a 12 weeks doing keto going to get shredded and then, okay, I'm going to eat all this bread and all these carbs again straight after I've done that and boom, rebound and pile it on. If you're really wanting to change, it's about adjusting your lifestyle for the long run, not just doing some 10-week quick fix thing that's going to reverse 30 years of what you've been doing.
It's the same for everything. Like, I think it's just, you've hit the nail on the head with you. There is no quick fix. It's all about those foundation, um, those foundational blueprints that you put in, and then it all kind of, you know, the more stable your empire that you build on that foundation will then become. One critical call out I think that you hit on there was engaging with a third party. So unfortunately, we are quite cruel to ourselves. So when it comes to, and that's something I work on a lot when it comes to what I'm up to. I criticize hustle culture, but I fall into the trap of it myself all the time. Um, but engaging with third parties is where it gets where it can be tempered. You can have someone sort of help you align your expectations to a more healthy place, but also encouraging you to have, as you say, those kind of incremental steps that are going to mean that you've got victories happening here and there that keep you motivated. It sounds basic, and it sounds like something for anyone that's worked in a corporate realm has probably heard time and time again via the monthly reporting and things like that. But I've worked in both environments where there was those kind of incremental positives getting called out, and I've worked in environments where there was none. And the ones that weren't was, we were so much more demotivated because it just, you don't see your wins, you don't sort of get a calculation of the progress you've made, you don't sort of see a material kind of growth or an immaterial growth via, some kind of report generating software, whatever it is. And it's the same for working out, something really simple as your goal laced into the long, I think when we first met, we broke it down that way, didn't we? It was like a short term, mid term, long term, which is obviously
Yeah.
the sort of typical way that you kind of align it. But I think the long term is obviously always going to be the big one. And it's going to be the one that gives you the most satisfaction. But those short term wins will give you the motivation to keep reaching towards the long term.
Yeah, and the short term ones are really important for finding success and joy in the process. That's why when you do get into weight training, I think it's a really beneficial thing to do is writing down your workouts. So you can progressively overload and beat what you did last time. Well, I did 100 kilos for 10 reps last time. Okay, I'm going to get 11 reps. And then you get 11 and you're like, oh, wow, cool. I've made progress today. And you might have this aim of wanting to lose or gain 10 kilos, whatever it is. But then throughout that process, you're seeing yourself achieve small micro goals along that way. So you're not becoming destination focused of, man, I'm going to be so happy in 6 months when I've lost this amount of weight. It's like, man, I was happy with my session today because I did this much more or something. And some sessions you obviously won't do better than your last ones, but at least gives you a goal to work towards each session. And I'd say, honestly, more often than not, you probably will beat your previous self, especially when you're first just starting out.
Mm.
But I think it's real important to capture the micro goals as well as the macro goals because, like we discussed in our last podcast with Chloe, when you're so destination focused on this big end goal, you can have a massive crash afterwards. So if you're just hanging on to that, it can be quite detrimental, especially to your mental health. So having macro or micro goals along the way is super important because then you start to enjoy the process. It's not an obligation, it's something that you can be excited for each day.
Yeah, you fall in love with the process or fall in love with the journey, however you want to describe it. And that's something that always comes through from um, writers when I read about their process and what they've achieved and stuff. And um, there's always this message of with any young and up and coming writers, they are often drawn to I just want to get something published, I just want to get signed, I just want to break Hollywood or whatever. Um, and the response from those who are established is fall in love with the journey. Don't tell yourself that once you achieve that, everything's going to be amazing because yeah, you will have that crash. Um,
It's
and
all
it would
about the climb, eh, bro?
absolutely, yeah. And my drinking was the antithesis of that. It was the short term pleasure bursts that I got addicted to. Um, and they wear off I mean, there was a lot going on there. It was also a nullification of my sensitivity. It was also a distraction. There's a whole multitude of things going on. But it was also a short term pleasure burst, and it wears off really quickly. And then you need to sort of fire onto the next one. You've sort of developed yourself into a stream of appreciating the journey with something that's actually long term sustainable. Um, that to me, I mean, I've still got a lot of learning there myself to go. I'm now a little over 2 years sober, and I've come to realize that this process is just probably lifelong. But that's where I believe I'm going with my mindset, and then that and coming back to where we started, that instinctively feels like the right place to continue moving.
Yeah, and to me, from outsider's perspective, it seems like you're doing all the right things to, further enhance and grow that positive environment and distance yourself from the drinking culture as much as you can. It sounds like you're really growing something that's really positive around you, especially when it comes to obviously moving, getting out of the environment, being Wellington, but then getting into so many different positive avenues, being your riding, being the guitar, being the gym. You have so many things around you that aren't remotely related to drinking at all.
Yeah,
So
totally. Yeah.
they're so distant from that culture. It sounds like to me, and from what I've observed, that you're taking all the positive, correct
One
steps.
one thing I'll actually just quickly mention there is also just doing something that you haven't done before. I went to my first AFL game was 2 or 3 weeks ago, with my mate Jack and his partner, and it was awesome. It
Mhm.
was it was great. Like
Big vibe. You said the crowd was big, eh?
yeah, I mean, it was just the grandeur of it. I hadn't been to an event that had that number of um, people involved, and just the energy and like you know coming back to what we were saying before about comparisons with your previous self. I don't know if I would have put myself in a situation. I might have not stuck my nose up. It might have been like, oh, maybe, and then sort of pull out last minute. That kind of
Mhm.
unreliable, um, kind of that sort of sloppy kind of social engaging sort of style. Well, this was like, no, no, I'm definitely keen,
Mhm.
and then push through, and it was like, yeah, it was, just being in a whole new environment. I kind of walked away from it and thought, I want to do more of that. I want to go to things that I
That
just don't
was
know.
fun.
I don't know anything
Yeah.
about, and just kind of like see how it goes, open mind, and just go from there.
Yeah. Man, that's cool. There's nothing else you wanted to mention? It kind of feels like that was a pretty organic way to wrap it up. I think we kind of wrapped it right back to the beginning where we started.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think no, I think it's going well, and I look forward to the next phase. Once I've got this apartment sorted. I was in a shop yesterday looking at like pans and pots and knives and stuff like that, and like just kind of getting this sort of energy starting to develop of I'm rebuilding a home
Yeah.
here. I'm building a from scratch kind of thing, and like that's going to take time. But again, coming back to our sort of, I guess, the ideology that we tried to put across here is, I'm not just going to smash that out and have it all built in one weekend. It's going to be an incremental growth, and
Yeah.
that's more sustainable. And yeah, I feel excited about the path ahead.
And although they seem like minor decisions, how you're going to decorate your apartment and stuff, but that's going to be a place where you spend a lot of your time. So how well that's laid out for your personal preference is so important to your mental health as well. So it's not something to be
100%.
taken lightly.
All right. Feels like a great place to wrap it.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Our first virtual one too. I think, touch wood, it seems to have gone all right, right?
Yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're watching this, it's gone all right. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
or even listening to it too. That
Yeah.
would be good.
All
All
right.
right,
Awesome, man. We'll catch you guys at the next. Which episode was this again? It's episode 5.
5. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll catch you again in episode 6. Take it easy.
See you.